Okay, let's go ahead and get started on this. I'm assuming volume and everything is still good. So this is actually looking at something else. I didn't see the hands raised, but okay. Yeah, so tonight we're going to talk a little bit more about licensing. We're going to talk a little bit more about what to expect next week and beyond. And this will be the last of these for a couple of weeks. I'm not even sure if we'll have one the week following the trade show, or I guess I should say the week of the trade show, since the Thursday that comes after that is actually the day after the last day of the trade show. So probably not going to be in a great place to want to do a meetup then, but maybe we'll see what happens. More likely what will happen is we'll actually have something from the show itself. And we're still working out all the details on that, so I'll have more on that as we go forward. But I'll talk a little bit about it tonight because it does become a little relevant to what we're doing and so forth. So just chatting a little bit about licensing. So the two things that everybody is continuing to ask about and wants to know about is A, how do you connect up your license with your provider instance? And B, what are the differences between the levels? And so we'll just tackle them one by one and go forward. So hooking them up is projected to be pretty easy. We believe that it's really just going to be a matter for people that don't want to do anything beyond like account setups and matching and all that sort of stuff, to just simply go in and plug in a license key and one input line, enter a pub key and a second input line, and then the two will be mated together. And we will have validation software on the back end that looks at the license key and says, yes, that's a valid key. And it will also look to say, is that a valid pub key? And if it is, then it will go ahead and marry them up. Doesn't mean that the pub key is online, by the way. You can certainly marry up a license key with a pub key that isn't currently online, as long as it's a valid pub key, a valid address, and so that'll be a really easy process. Might not stay that way, by the way. The reason being that we're starting out, and this is the case in a lot of things, and I'll give you an example of this next thing. But we're starting out small, obviously, and we will grow as we can and as we will. But what happens is that in the beginning, nobody will be earning the kind of dollars that should really raise any kinds of, enormous burdens in terms of, like taxation and so forth. And so I think there's a number in the United States, for instance, that if you make over $600 a year, something like that, that's when you really need to start paying attention and perhaps even KYC and do all of the stuff so that you're, pretty much legal. And it might even be a little more than that. But at the end of the day, nobody's going to be at that number right off the bat, and it'll take time to get to that place. So we'll start small and say anybody can just register anonymously and it'll be what it'll be. But you need to be aware that at some point it may become a requirement to register, depending on what jurisdiction you're in order to fully be compliant with whatever regulations and rules that exist out there. That said, I mean, truth be told, and this shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, and it shouldn't be any kind of, oh my gosh, it's not right. It's quite possible that everybody's going to want to register and need to register and provide some sort of KYC capability, simply because when we start out and we just throw the first storage out there, it's going to be really low hanging fruit type stuff, archival, storage partners, low stakes. They're not going to want to, gamble the high end stuff yet. So, it'll kind of be a slow start to things. And in that world, there might not be much compliance. There might be some compliance with like, well, if you're an EU corporation, you have to keep your stuff within the EU. Or if you'll have a few things like that. But as we go forward and we do start to look at, SOAP 2 and, HIPAA and a few other kinds of compliance regimes, these are the things where you're going to earn the real money, right? These are the things that are going to give you the kind of money that really turn this thing into a lucrative deal. And to take advantage of those, you're going to have to provide levels of auditability. Now, we can certainly build in auditable software into the Examiner, UI and into the Examiner core software, supervisor, super admin, that will provide a lot of that auditability, and perhaps even enough to the point where the actual user who owns the device isn't actually a necessity for certain kinds of compliance. I still anticipate that the top end compliance areas, the stuff that's at the very, most expensive stuff, the most lucrative stuff, that stuff's still going to take some kind of significant compliance KYC process on your part. So you can't get there and then look back in hindsight and say, Faust never told us about this, because this has always been part of it. And it's always going to be a problem for the regular crypto projects, because they're just not going to be able to tackle a lot of these things very easily, simply because of the nature of the way decentralization works. In some cases, they'll skirt around it, but you're not going to get big medical organizations to dump a bunch of data up on networks that are just completely and totally anarchical in nature. So anyway, that's the situation there. So tying them together, and then the next step above, tying them together with an account. And the deal is that we're really working hard right now on our Keycloak integration in order to provide a lot of account-based services. As you saw in that little sneak teaser I posted, it's sort of like a console that covers everything that we're doing. And, when you go in and access your Examiner from any remote location or from anywhere, if you have an account registered with us, essentially you'll be able to log in, and then on the left-hand side of that screen, the console, all of your assets will populate. So if you're an MSP, for instance, and you have a bunch of customers out there and you're managing relayers for them, all those relayers will populate over there. If you also at the same time have a whole fleet of Examiners that you're servicing around a city or something like that, maybe you're putting them inside a bunch of franchise offices, you convince somebody to take them, you'll see all those pop up on the side. And then what will happen is you'll click on each individual unit, and the actual Examiner UI, which is, as you can see, being completely redesigned and restyled, will show up on the right-hand side, and you'll be able to access all your units. That's account-based, and to tie them all together, you're going to have an account with us and go through that. I believe that the basic CLI will definitely have account-based capabilities, but we aren't going to be building any sort of UI stuff for the basic providers at this point. I suspect that some of our more enterprising third parties will, leap forward and provide some access and find ways to be able to service that stuff. But for us, the DIY world is really people that want to come aboard and get into the Examiner software UI world, because that's where all this interesting stuff like the compliance and the adherence to terms of service and all of that sort of stuff is going to really become granular and take effect. So that's kind of the story there. As far as licensing and tying licenses together with the UI version, standard and full, it'll be the same sort of thing. It'll still happen in one of the very first screens that you encounter, and then after that, then you will end up getting the payload for the actual UI install and so forth. So the other thing that can happen very easily out of that is it's going to be very simplistic for people to move license keys to different pub keys. And it'll just be a simple process of, okay, I'm spinning this provider down. I want to move over to this one. then you just register the new one, the old one goes away, and that's just how it works. There's not going to be any need to contact anybody or do any support. It's just the minute the database sees the license key is being applied to a new pub key, the old one becomes inactive, and there you go. The other thing that's happening right now, just so you know, you might be in this case, we are processing payments on these things manually. So part of the reason why is because we're kind of getting our feet wet with accepting all of these different kinds of payment options for software. And so what's happening is virtually everybody outside of the United States, and about 30% of the people in the United States, are triggering fraud filters on our processing. And, we're not even really going back and validating them. We're not doing anything because most of the fraud filters that are being triggered can't be unsort of triggered. Like, if you're using a credit card from Eastern Europe, there's not a lot of protection there unless you're using something like PayPal. So at the end of the day, we're just automatically passing them through. But it's okay because it's software, and it's like we control the license, power. So if it turns out we go ahead and accept that credit card and it becomes obvious that credit card is a fraud card and so forth, we just shut off the license key, and, it's not no harm, no foul. It's like you're not going to be able to do anything. So the other thing that's happening in us moving forward is we're hitting complete on some of the crypto payments, but some of the crypto payments take longer than others. And, for whatever reason, people never seem to have their crypto ready when they make a crypto purchase online. I don't quite understand it, but it is the case. And so that they start to get to a place where they're going to run out of time. And so some of these have been completed. There's probably been a handful that have been completed, but then ultimately they failed to make the payment in time. And then Coinbase turns around and, marks the transaction as failed and doesn't give you a chance to recomplete it. And in that case, it's still, you've already got the key, right? You've already got the license key. So, you might be thinking, oh, I'm going to win here. But you're not, because all those fails are going to get, essentially excluded from being captured in the database. And so they won't work. You'll try and tie it to a pub key and it just won't take it. So if that happened to you, you're going to need to process a new order. And this time around, you're going to need to have your crypto ready when you do it. So that's the story there. Okay, let me just grab one other thing here real quick. So we tweeted some stuff out yesterday about examiners and licenses as well. So let's kind of go through that really quick. One of the things that we did that a few people were caught, I guess, by surprise, even though we said it a few times before, we continue to let everybody know how much we appreciate and like and want to support the people that purchase Examiner hardware. And that's not going to stop. And so if you bought an Examiner, you're going to get one free standard license. So, what is a $220 value automatically? You can use it anywhere. You do not need a license for an Examiner. It comes built into the unit. Whether at some point in time we go ahead and allow you to divorce that license from the unit, say you decide to trash the unit 3 years from now and put it on something else, that's a question for later. It's not a question for today. But you do get an extra license to use on a DIY that you will build yourself or, whatever. So in some cases, people are coming back to us and asking for refunds for, purchases they already made. And there's no reason why we wouldn't do it. We certainly will give a refund. I would suggest at this point, because you're getting in April, when the rebates are still there, and believe me, the rebates are not going to be extended this time. They just aren't. The rebates for the hardware continue to run. And when we do another order, I'm guessing the rebates will continue to run. But for the software, you're going to have until the end of this month. And then that's it. And I understand what I'm saying there, and I'll get to it in a minute. But all right. So anyway, the deal there on the software is that you're getting a free one you can use. And I think we made this decision in a final kind of way now. There still was a little iffiness to it. But licenses are one-time purchases. In other words, you buy a license and there won't be like a $99 yearly subscription. At least not on the basic, DIYs, because I know that's a real piece of heartburn for everybody, even though frankly, year 2 and year 3 is when you're going to probably be most positioned and want to go ahead and put the money in, because at that point you'll be earning money and now you're not. So I don't know. It is what it is. Beyond that, though, there probably will be a situation where Examiner UI software, the top line, does end up with some sort of a subscription model. Won't be, full price, obviously, everybody. It'd be something like Creative Cloud or, Office 365 or whatever, where you have a small yearly, fee for ongoing subscriptions to cover the significant development work and so forth that we're putting in. At some point, I believe virtually all basic DIYs will upgrade to the full software. I just believe at some point the amount that you'll be able to earn, the kinds of stuff that we will support in there will become too compelling that you literally will not be able to stay in a DIY basic environment, and unless you're just essentially looking for set and forget lowest common denominator storage and earnings. All the stuff that's lucrative, you're going to probably need to have the UI when it's all said and done. This shouldn't really be a surprise, by the way. None of this should be, because in the end, the whole concept of doing the licensing to begin with was essentially to continue to support you, the community, even though some of you people just showed up. In light of the fact that it would have been very easy for us just to go ahead and quickly make the decision, you know what, we're just going to switch to all hardware and all licensed hardware, because a lot of other projects have done that, and it would be very easy for us to do that. But I think we have a strategy to make it work either way. So we'll go ahead and do it. And, for at least the next year, you can count on having the ability to build your own units and so forth. I'm not saying it'll stay there forever. I mean, it could come to being, 12 months from, when we start the licenses going live, and say, well, look, okay, years gone by, you've made your year back, and now, we're reconsidering and thinking about this. But at this point, I don't think that's going to be the case. I think we'll go ahead and we'll allow it to happen. I just don't think most people are going to do DIY. I think most people are going to end up in pre-built systems ultimately down the road, and they'll get better and better and better. They'll get easier to install and set up. They'll get, more friendly on the routing. They'll get more friendly on everything. We're in a big learning curve right now. As we get better at it, the units will get better. Our partners that we validate will come in stronger, and ultimately we'll build, better units. Okay, so that's that. Licenses are transferable, just means you can sell them if you want. I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't know where a market will form for them. I don't know what it'll ultimately entail. I don't know if a bunch of people will, be out there trying to buy or sell on the open market. I guess it really just sort of depends on how things go, over the coming, 2 quarters after we launch the product. At this point, we'll say they're transferable. I don't think that the rebates will transfer, though. If you end up selling a license you bought in April, I think ultimately the rebate's going to be tied directly to that first pub key, but that's an open area. We're not totally sure on that, so don't hold me to that one way or the other. As far as any of the UI licenses that are purchased or licenses that you get along with Examiners, those are transferable no matter, when you got them. So that's that. Okay. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop and I'm going to take questions on the licensing. That way we don't get into the end and then do, sort of mix and match question and answer. I think we'll split this up and we'll take questions right now about licenses. So let me see if there's anybody out there with their hands raised. Looks like there is. So I'm going to call on you, and I'm only going to call on you to take questions about licensing. So if your question isn't about licensing, put your hand down. And if your hand's still up in 2 seconds, then you're coming to the stage. So come to the stage. Unless you put your hand up by accident. All right, we'll move on to the next one then. See what happens here. Hey. When I click on you, you got to come to the stage. That's how it works. Okay, we'll go to the third. Technology's a bitch. There we go.
Yeah, sorry, trying it on the iPhone for the first time.
No problem. What's your question?
Difference between the regular and the full on the licensing?
Yeah. Okay. So we don't know. We're not quite there yet. The whole idea with the the starting process was sort of a good, better, best idea, but at the end of the day, it really isn't it. It really isn't that. It's DIY and it's get the Examiner experience. So what's probably going to happen in terms of figuring out what goes into the full version is we will essentially determine what we think is strategically possible for us to develop by the end of June, like we've talked about, and in terms of getting the full release out there. And it's a pretty significant payload. We know of a number of things that are pretty valuable and important we want to add. And then what we'll do is probably pull out a couple, 2 or 3 of the most, sort of lucrative type features to make the standard version. I mean, that's just common practice. It's not even, it's not even controversial. So what are some of those things? I don't think remote access would be one that we would pull out. That would be one that everybody would get. But the accounting, I think, is definitely one that would only be available in the top end. And the accounting is going to be so important in this whole thing when it's all said and done, because trying to understand how these contracts are moving money around is really going to be a big, sort of challenge that people have been trying to solve for actually several years. But we think we have a handle on it, and so that will be one that will go out there. Compliance things might definitely be something that go into the top version that don't go into the second one, or maybe some of the more lucrative compliance. Maybe you get a base level of compliance, stuff, and then you don't get into the top tier of compliance. And what does that mean? Well, maybe you aren't even considered for medical data if you don't have a full version, right? Something along those lines. You might be considered fine for GDPR type stuff, but you aren't considered for, medical health records and stuff along those lines. That's the kind of thing that we think, could easily be the case for a full version versus standard. As far as the things like remote access, the basic capabilities, all the Telegraph stuff, we're going to flesh out Telegraph in a much bigger way. We've, changed how Influx brings that stuff in, built new servers for it. So, the scanners, all that stuff's going to be in the standard version. But it's stuff that you could actually make money on that will be the difference between basic, standard, and full. And so ultimately, I still believe most are going to end up in the full version when it's all said and done. That's just my thinking. Thanks.
That was all my question.
All right, so my question is in regards to the additional license, the standard license that comes with the Examiner. And I know you'd said somewhere in the Discord that, licenses would be upgradable. Does that also apply to the standard that comes with the miner? Like, would that be upgradable?
Yeah, there's no reason why it wouldn't be. And the only thing is that, there's no rebating that goes on with the Examiner licenses. So at the end of the day, it's just going to be a standard upgrade, whenever you decide you want to do it. some people may just hold on to those for a year and then decide, oh, hey, I'm ready to go ahead and do something with it. Who knows? Maybe manufacturers will show up down the road and say, we're building, you can buy a unit from us with or without a license. If you're somebody that already owns a license, you can just apply your license to our rig. We might even do that, right? We might even sell an Examiner, in another quarter that doesn't have a full license on it. And you can buy it, you can put your standard on there and then maybe pay the difference and ultimately upgrade to the full version and save a few bucks when you're buying the next Examiner. So there's a lot of things that I think you're going to be able to do there, but definitely upgrade is going to be one of them. More questions?
That's it for me. Thank you.
Cool. Coming to the stage.
Hey, how you doing? This is my first, actually second time here. The first time I had a different name on it, and I changed it so that way you don't freak out like the last time. Uh, yeah, my the name that I have was Golden Coin, and it's that was my first time, so that's why I changed my name. I have a few questions, but regarding to the licensing. So you were basically, and I know you have a lot of people with question. I just real quick, it's basically you're saying is that there are options to purchase a license, and there is going to be a point that I will not be able to use my DUI system, and I have to at the end buy one of your system
Well, or buy a license.
or buy a license. Okay, so. And then you were mentioning something that we have to actually be registering. It's going to be something required that we have to register for IRS.
Well, not IRS, so to speak. There might be a case where we have to accept or take KYC information. And if we take KYC information, know your customer, what ends
Right.
up happening is we may have to make it available to different authorities and regulatory agencies, depending on, what kinds of dollar amounts we're paying out to that individual provider, what jurisdiction they're in. There's no reason, like if you were in Mexico, there's no reason why I would give your information to the IRS, and
Right.
so it's a situation where all of crypto is going through this right now, and it's going to ultimately shake out that projects are going to have to accept and understand that laws and regulations are part of it. But
Right.
again,
Right.
KYC is going to be lucrative. I mean, once you do it, it's going to allow you into a club where you can get more lucrative data than just the anonymous, garbage data that people are throwing up. The data that's important, and application data and database data and all kinds of valuable data, that's you're going to need and probably want to be very much KYC'd. So anyway.
Okay, so it's got to be kind of like a sort of a KYC agency that you have to be registered in order to be part of this project. Now, what it's I don't know if you might know this. What it's actually the price on licensing per se? Like I know you were talking about difference of tiers of licensing. So what's gonna be those price ranges?
Licenses are available right now at examiner.net. It's 99, 220, and 450. And the deal is that up until the end of this month, the basic version for 99 bucks is 100% rebated to you over the course of the coming year. So it's essentially free. You buy it today and then get paid back, at I think month 6 and month 12 is the way we did it, as long as you keep 95% uptime. And anyway, go ahead.
Oh, okay. No. I'm just like, okay. I'm just writing all this down. one more question is I do have a friend that I talk about the project, and he knows someone that he was looking for a sign up for a service for cloud storage. What is the price for that? Do you have that info so I can pass it on?
What's happening right now, and I'm going to get into this in detail, and after we finish up these questions, the situation is we've been in a Herculean effort for 3.5 years on the back end to build out something that actually works in a large scale distributed storage project, and as I look back in hindsight, we never anticipated how big this kind of work is. And so the last maybe 6 to 8 months, we've pivoted and started building on the layers that go over top. And so starting next week, we will begin the process of actually onboarding people. So it may or may not be a surprise that I haven't yet decided formally how much per terabyte we're going to charge. And I'm pretty sure that no matter what we show up next week with, it's going to change pretty rapidly. We'll start at some number and it will end up going lower or going higher depending upon what the market, forces tell us as we go forward. It's just not an issue for me right now. What I've said to everybody in the community is that we're probably going to target $4 to pay you guys, but then I think everybody kind of walked away with the wrong idea because they thought we were paying everybody $4. But right now it's crazy, and you guys don't. I think a lot of you don't even actually realize this. We're paying you like $54 a terabyte right now. It's some insane number. Last month it was $58 or $59. The month before that it was $65 a terabyte. There are no terabytes out there, except if you're an old school person who was here back in, March or April of last year, and then you just went nuts and cleaned up on us. You made a ton of money. And to the extent that some people started trying to game the process and were feeding their own providers a whole bunch of data, and they're, rapidly being whacked. So, that's the situation. I think ultimately long term, the price that we're going to end up selling to customers $14 a terabyte, depending on what's involved in terms of the erasure coding settings and some things along those lines. Whether it's the low end of that or the high end of that, I don't really know yet. But I don't think it's going to go below $8 because I just don't think there's any reason for it to. And in fact, I tend to be the kind of person that thinks that you should shoot for the higher end stuff, because if you go garbage level, the customers you're going to get are going to be garbage level, and then you're not going to have a very good time. So anyway, probably $8 to $12, something like that, is a good range to tell your partner.
Okay, no problem. So basically, I can purchase a license for my actual system that I have, so I can keep using it, and it's one-time charge. You just mentioned it, right?
Yeah, we've decided that, and like I said, the exception might be a subscription model for the top end, but again, it wouldn't be $450 each year. It'd be like $49 or something like that per year.
So okay, I'm just gonna say just the way I actually see it. So basically, that we put our equipment, we're gonna get charged for a license to do this, and then the customer that's gonna need the service is gonna get charged that. Okay.
Thanks for that editorial.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Wheeler just slapped the shit out of me. Here, Rainfall, come to the stage. Got to unmute.
Got you on that one. Thanks. How you doing?
Good. I was just thinking that Discord stages really needs to have audience laughter, because I don't know if my jokes ever land or not. But anyway, go ahead.
The push button. Yeah, I had a couple of questions on the full license. I haven't called in before, but I feel like we got to support you, so I'm going to do the full license no matter what. So questions about that is, are you going to have I'm running a Synology NAS, an 8-bay NAS, and I have one drive in it right now. Are you going to have like a process in the UI where we can do adding drives, or will it be automatic if we add a drive?
So that's pretty quite likely to be the case, that it will be just like it is right now in the Examiners, where you plug a new drive in, it automatically picks it up, it automatically provisions the storage folder on it, and it automatically adds it to the, to the setup. That should be a pretty easy one for us to include. It'll definitely be the case.
Okay, and then probably I should have asked this question first. Is the when we get this license, is it going to have like an upgrade process if we're like running on a Docker setup, that it'll upgrade to running with your system like it's fully running, or is there going to be have to totally reinstall to do that?
Well, that's a good question, and I don't want to answer it out of hand, but I will say we will do our best to make sure that it's a straight upgrade process. I don't really see anything that would suggest why it shouldn't be, since you're just running an instance of SPD at this point. But I don't want to say that with any 100% certainty, because every time I do that, the guys in the back end come back and say, "Oh yeah, but you didn't think about this," and next thing I know, we're forcing you to down your instance. I'm pretty sure upgrades from basic will be able to go to full without downing your instance. But at this point, just take it as a 80 to 90% thing. I will specifically get more info on that over the next week, so that by the end of this month, we'll have at least a decent amount of certainty on that. Because I know that the rebates are something that people are pretty interested in. So we will try and get as much info on the 450 version by the end of this month, so that you can know and make a good decision.
Okay, great. And two more questions. Are you going to have like a backup and restore type of or protection system for the for the system, for the main folder?
Two things that we're doing right now. One is that on the core daemon side, we are changing how storage gets allocated to multiple disks, because it's just messed up right now and works like a striped RAID set, which doesn't make any sense at all. So the first thing that will end up happening is, and this goes kind of back to what I talked about last week, right now it's essentially a single contract, but what will likely happen is when we finish off this sprint, and this is a very high priority sprint for us, let's say you have 4 drives, what will end up happening is you'll end up with 4 contracts, 1 contract per drive. And then ultimately what we will also do is build into the actual metadata redundancy, so that it stores the contract information across all of the drives, so that they act as a true RAID for the metadata, in addition to being singular in terms of the actual data. Beyond that, there is still this thing about being able to pull some sort of a snapshot or some sort of a meta upload, so that you have ongoing protection. And I think that that's going to be an evolving thing for us. Right now, the Examiner, you can go to the console, and look, I'm not even going to lie, we kind of misdesigned a little bit in the beginning in terms of making these things where you have to plug a monitor into the unit to actually access it. Most NASs don't work that way. So at the end of the day, we will pull the stuff that currently is in the console of the Linux stuff, which right now we include a snapshot to USB, which is auto pulled. Like I think it's every 10 minutes or something like that. Some pretty crazy low number that we're doing a snapshot off into a folder, and then you can just go and pull it off onto a removable media right now. So that process will be baked into it. What you do with that is really the open question, and that always begs, well, why don't you just throw your metadata up onto the network? But it's like Inception. I mean, it's a real Mobius strip when you start saying that, because the whole idea of metadata is the addressing of where things live on the network. So if you load the where things live on the network payload up onto the network and then lose it, you've lost
There you
all
go.
the addresses, so you can't find the data anymore. So solving that problem is rocket science, but we will get through it at some point and come up with a novel answer that I think is going to work pretty good. But that won't happen right away.
Great. I'm a DBA. I'm in a contractor. I do database administration, so I'm all on for protection as many ways we can. One last question is, I just heard about the licensing being a one-time. So on the $495, since you're going to have also subscription for maybe $49 or whatever, are we like if we pay $495 now, or $450 now, are we grandfathered in for life, or do we then next year maybe have to start paying $49 a month? Or I mean a year.
Well, like I said, the first step is you don't have to pay $450 next year, which is where we were kind of at when we announced licensing. So I would suggest at this point that if you pay $450, first of all, you're going to get the rebates, the big rebates, so you're going to get about half of that back. But then the second thing is that, you know, it's quite likely that this Examiner interface and UI and capability is going to be improving significantly over the coming first 2 or 3 years. So my guess is that a $49 subscription is going to be something you're going to be more than happy to pay, because you're going to see us banging out updates and upgrades all the time as we go forward. That said, I don't know. You know, here's what affects it, by the way. And you know, everybody can take from this whatever they want. I literally, you know, have been consistent on all of this stuff since day one. So, you know, we have this big cold wallet that was, you know, pre-mined way back in the first Genesis block. And we could have done a lot of things with it. We could have turned it into, you know, our own, you know, piggy bank. We could have, you know, used it for all different kinds of things. We could have burned it. We could have done a lot of things. And we do have a significant coin burn, by the way, bigger than almost, you know, 90% of projects that are out there. Coins have been burned on our project and continue. 10% of every block gets burned. So us burning that wallet wouldn't have made any sense. Instead, we figured out about halfway through the right answer is to use it to compensate you guys, to grow the network, to build the network. So the whole point behind that is that we believe that wallet will become more valuable over time as the project becomes more valuable, as we grow, as we add more providers, as we get storage onto the network, as our software develops and gets better and better. We believe that wallet will get better and better, and ultimately the coins that you earn today are quite likely to be worth something different in the future. I have to be careful there because, you know, I'm not going to get into trouble with the SEC by telling you should buy our coin today because it's going to be 100x tomorrow, because I don't know that. I just know from a trader's perspective how things like this work, and I just know where we are as a project. So, you know, the point being is we might get to next June, next April, next May, whenever the year runs out on the startup, and we might be in a completely different place, right? We might have gotten a $20 million cap raise from Silicon Valley, right? And if that's the case, we might turn around and say to everybody who was here with us today, we're going to give a grace, right? And everybody that comes in then, you know, has to pay full boat. Why? Because that's how we have always done it. We've always taken care of people that have been early with us. And I don't see us doing anything different than that. So anyway, that's just the philosophy.
Yeah, and then $4 a month is really nothing for a support project anyway. So for someone to have to pay that, that's nothing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I will see you in Vegas. I'm in LA, so going to make a little drive out there for a Sunday and Monday.
Since you're a DBA, DBM, you definitely want to come up and say hello, because you probably have an opportunity to maybe pick up some extra coins if you're interested.
Sure thing.
Cool. Thanks.
I put my name into the added Discord list too there.
Okay. Perfect.
For help.
Well,
okay, I will see you then. I'll talk to you then, and I'll see you at the party.
Great. Thanks. Boss.
Hey, g'day, how are you?
Australia in the house.
Yes, Aussie. Just a quick question on the licensing. like you mentioned subscription, and then I think I mentioned to you last time. I'm not too sure whether about volume licensing. That's all. You mentioned something about volume licensing. That's something you were looking into. Um, and the other question was also if you're going to have do-it-yourself units or units we buy from you guys, and they'll already come with a license. What if you want to have like a setup where you're going to have multiple locations and managing different locations and that sort of thing? Have you guys looked into that yet?
So, as far as managing multiple locations, that is that graphic I showed in the events discussion channel. We are definitely hell bent for Leather to get remote access capability built into the Examiner. It's critical because people are going to want to put 30, 40 units out there, and they can't put them all under a single subnet. They need to scatter them around. That's what makes them valuable. That's what's going to make them attractive to customers. So you're not going to want to have to drive around to manage all your units. You've got to have the access you need to get into them. So that is a key functionality that will be built into them. As far as volume licensing, it will come. It's purposely not being discussed until the end of April because the last thing I want right now is for somebody to come in and look to get a really big volume licensing deal and then try and squeeze it in under the the rebates thing so that they can turn around and over the next year sell a bunch of licenses on eBay. It's just not going to happen. So volume licensing will be a thing, but it won't actually show up, and we won't actually begin talking about it until May 1st, May Day.
Okay, so you would have volume licensing over subscription.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one-time deal thing put the thing to bed on normal subs. Like I said, subscriptions on the high-end version are quite likely to occur in a 12-month time. So next June, next July, whenever, it's quite likely we're going to come back to the community and say, remember when we talked about a sub, there's probably going to be like a $50 a month or whatever, something like that. Might be 30. I don't know what it'll be. It might be 70. I don't know what it'll be. We'll come back and we'll say, look, this is all the features we rolled out for you over the year. These are all the features we think we're going to roll out over the coming year. And for that, we would like to see, this kind of a deal. And, I want to say something about that because I think it's relevant here. This is a really interesting experiment because what's going to happen here, I'm sure of this, by the way, and you can mark my words, and I may not get it right to the number, but I know I'm going to get it right. So right now, there is a core group of people that are pretty committed to the project, pretty committed to understanding it. They come into the Discord, and even those folks don't have, perfect information, right? Because there's just too much to know. And so daily I answer questions from people who I would think would know the answer to a question, but they have a completely, off base sort of understanding, and, we get it right and then move on. But there's 4,000 some 100 providers that showed up. That doesn't mean 4,200 people, but, provider instances that showed up in the December timeframe. And ultimately, of those, there are at least, some high percentage, maybe as much as 50%, who pay very little attention to what we're talking about in here in these meetups, in the Discord channels, anywhere. They just clock in and maybe look at something and then clock back out. So what's going to end up happening is we're going to get through the end of this month. We will have booked a number of licenses from the people that get it and want the rebates. Then we will move into the May to June timeframe when the development really sort of gets under the way big time. And then, as we start to approach June, we will put information out there left and right about the licensing as being a thing. And by then we'll have some customers on the network and things will be kind of moving forward. And we'll start to hear from more people that didn't know about licensing. And then we'll get to July 1st. And what will end up happening is a whole bunch of people will come raging into the Discord furious because they're no longer on the network that we're supporting. They're no longer getting incentives, and they feel like they've been robbed and cheated. And then they will learn about licensing for the very first time, and they will say, that's horseshit. How is that? That's not even crypto. What are you doing? And blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And mark my words, it's going to be coming. And
yeah, because a lot of the guys will have do-it-yourself units basically, and they're trying to save a buck here and there. But in the end, you have to with data, you have to be, you've got to be legit basically, and you've got to follow suit.
Here's the benefit for you, right? When those people do come, we're going to have a network breakdown to some degree. We're going to lose a number of providers, right? But that's not a bad thing. That won't be a bad thing for any of us, right? Yeah, sure, it'll look, interesting to see the chart go down, but at the same time, we won't be filling the network up with data yet, so it won't be a terrible thing for us. But what it will be is a good thing for you guys, because on a per provider basis, you'll be earning more. You'll be getting you more than your current share of data, because we will have weeded out the people who are essentially pikers, the free riders. And I know they don't think they're free riders. They think, whoa, I invested a lot of money in this thing. But at the end of the day, they're free riding on our software development, our network development, our marketing and advertising, and our idea. So if they don't think they're free riding, that's fine. But if they don't want to buy a license, that's also fine. And in the end, they won't get any revenues, and that will be fine.
Yeah, that sort of brought me to the question with do-it-yourself units. And you did mention a little bit earlier that later on down the track, I don't know if I misunderstood what you were saying, but they'll obviously still have to be a big component of the network, won't they?
The DIYs?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I have a different sort of viewpoint on that, I guess I should say. I look, I can go both ways with it.
I can understand that. Yep.
The one thing that's pretty clear to me is there's 35 exabytes, or there was. I don't know how much there is today. There's over 30 exabytes of storage that got instanced onto the Chia network. And the Chia network is bullshit. We all know it's bullshit. Just like Burstcoin, when things finally do break down, all of that storage is going to go somewhere else. And it's already looking right now. So people are showing up here, hey, I got 500 terabytes I need to put up somewhere. This looks pretty cool, and it makes no sense, right, to put 500 terabytes on our network right now. And notice that the Chia guys wouldn't say that. They'd say, come all comers, and of course the price just, did what it did. And the situation is that storage is going to get, instanced into the other networks that are viable online. And so right now, nobody's really competing for that space. I don't know what it'll look like in a year and a half. A year and a half from now, it may be the case we're onboarding so much customer data, and we can't build enough units to get enough storage that we really need that capacity. And if that's the case, then you will be right. DIYs will be very important. If, on the other hand, the supply chaining frees up, we get a couple of manufacturer partners, and we end up building out models that stretch across every price range, it may be the case that everybody goes pre-built, because it turns out that pre-built's just better than DIY. I don't know.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I get it. I think that's all for today for my questions. I'll wait till your next round of subject.
Okay. Joaddy.
Yes. Good evening.
Hi.
I had a quick question. I know that the standard and the full. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. The standard and the full, I think the rebate is like 60%. Is that right? Let's say 50 or 60, whatever the number is.
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me, but it sounds right.
Okay. Is it, when it's paid back, is it paid back in the currency that it's purchased?
Look, I'm gonna elucidate on this very clearly, because we have a guy in our community who feels it's his responsibility to say shit to me that is just it's just not right, and it doesn't make any sense to hear it. And this is one of them. You know, his take yesterday or 2 days ago was the only reason we're selling Examiners is so we can sell SCP coins from that big wallet. And I guess the understanding is so we can pocket money. I don't know. I don't know what the suggestion is, to be frank about it. What it is this. We are selling SCP coins out of that wallet by using them as the rebate currency. They are the rebate currency. If you pay with PayPal, you're not going to get a rebate in PayPal. You're getting a rebate in SCP coins. Look, the whole notion of the project from day one was how do we align this thing so everybody's incentives are pointing the same way so that there aren't some people over here that have a cross incentive with people over here. Because you find that all the time in these crypto projects where early people end up having cross sort of motivations to other people in the project, later comers or whatever. And in our case, I think you can't find a project where the incentives are as aligned as this. So you get paid in SCP, you have a motivation to see the price of SCP go up, right? Now, some people will tell you that's not true. They will say, right now, I have a motivation to see it go down because I want to earn more of it because I know it'll go up later. Well, you're really just saying, I expect that it's going to go up. I just happen to want it to go down temporarily before it does go up. So your incentive is still in line, is still aligned. The whole notion here is people then come and say, well, why don't you accept SCP for the units? Well, that makes no sense. That's not what we're doing, right? We're using that big cold wallet in order to fund the project. This is a key understanding. We certainly could have went out and just got a cap raise, more commensurate with the size of project we're building. And if we had done that, we could just have kept all those coins to ourselves. And then in another 2 years from now, rewarded ourselves in ways that most projects do, where the founders end up with $200 or $300 million before they've ever done anything, and it's ridiculous. It just, to me, it makes no sense that these crypto projects have founders that are pocketing fuck you money before they've ever actually produced anything that truly works. And we're just not that. We're not those people. And if that means we end up going down in flames and not actually making any money at all, well, that'll be how it goes. And we'll look back in hindsight and be pissed at ourselves for any mistakes we made that caused it to happen. Anyway, there it is.
Good. I add one other question about KYC. I don't know whether to answer it now or later.
Well, go ahead.
Okay. I know you mentioned that as we progress, we're getting to a little bit more lucrative business, and that's going to require like KYC and that stuff. Is there any, for the providers, is there any liability situations or chances of litigation or anything like that involved with any kind of business we might get into in the future in terms of the provider?
I think with the providers, to start with, there's always been this ability to hang your hat on as the provider. You don't have the same kind of liability, for hosting the stuff that the person who's actually putting it online has. That ultimately you can't be held necessarily accountable and responsible. Well, that as long as you provide like the ability to DCMA it and takedowns and all that sort of crap, that's held pretty okay. But from our perspective, that's really not good enough. And ultimately, I think the decentralized guys are starting to figure that out. They're starting to get called, on the carpet on some of this stuff because, what you would guess is, BitTorrent, what do you think people use BitTorrent for? It's not to save your doctor's records, right? So what do you think decentralized networks are going to be used for? Well, we all know. And that's not what this is. This is something completely different. And so what ends up happening is customer gets onboarded. One of the first things that they're going to, they're going to get a dual-sided agreement. They're going to get a SLA, which is our guarantee to them, and then they're going to sign a TOS, terms of service, which is their guarantee to us. And if they upload something to the network that is illegal and ultimately makes it public, right? Because that's a thing on our network. Once you upload, you can use the S3 protocol to provide a straight ahead URL right back to the world. Once you make something public and it's identified by legitimate authorities as being an illegal piece of information that's out there, we will let the customer know, look, you got to take that down. It's against your terms. They will get a warning. If they don't take it down, we may have multiple warnings. We haven't yet set that up yet, but we will warn them. And then once they don't provide correct mitigation to that warning, then we will essentially cut their contract off. We don't have access to their data. Their data lives forever, but we can cut off their ability to continue to provide access to the public on it, or even to be able to download it themselves by cutting their contract, right? If we cut off their contract, they can no longer access the data themselves. We can't access it either, which is part of the decentralized nature of our project. But at the same time, they can't access it and it's no longer available publicly. And so the liability for you guys is not there. I mean, you don't have liability because we are taking care of it. If ultimately you got sued, you could turn around and countersue us for not living up to our responsibility to you. Now, you will have a terms of service with us as well, where you have to live up to certain things. And one of those is that if you're on our network, that you don't find ways to game, our storage, you don't find ways to upload illegal stuff and somehow sneak in under our contracts, that you aren't, messing with the software in those kinds of ways. So, liability is a big thing with us, and it will definitely be part and parcel of real live data storage.
So those terms of service you were just talking about, that comes when the KYC comes into.
Well, the terms of service for the customers will come the minute the first customer pays us money for storage on the network. Right now, all of the real people, quote unquote, that are putting stuff online, who are trying things out, just testing and just trying to see how it works, are using a coupon. So there's no money changing hand, no consideration. Once there's consideration, then there will be a terms of service in place.
No, I meant with the providers, with us and you.
Well, with you guys right now, it's also not critical because at the end of the day, we haven't yet set that up to where we are limiting the contract. So right now, we can't. Well, we can now. We couldn't last month. Let's just say it like that. We couldn't last month discern the difference between our contract data and outside contract data. So if you had 4 terabytes on your system, 2 terabytes could be ours and 2 terabytes could be somebody else. We wouldn't know how to discern between them. We now have that. The next step is to make it so that you have the ability to turn off that outside data. And once you're able to turn that data off, and once we're able to limit you, well, now, like I said, limit you to just our data as far as what we pay out, then having a terms of service is sort of baked right into that, because you won't be able to house anything other than our data. And our data does come with a terms of service from the people that are putting the storage up. So whatever terms of service we engineer with you will be more based on how we determine we want, a community standard of behavior to look. And that isn't critical to happen immediately. It can happen over the next 6 months. At the end of the day, that's to protect us from you, not to protect you from us.
Gotcha. Yeah, that opens up a lot more questions, but I don't want to ask to take this down a different route. I just hope, I'm pretty sure you will have another AMA about just this kind of topic, maybe.
Yeah, but I mean, you're going to be protected right from the beginning. So that's the key take home right now.
Okay.
The protections will continue to be, dialed in over the next year. I have no doubt that that's going to be an ongoing and evolving thing, but there's no doubt that it will start out in place.
Okay. Very good. Thanks. I appreciate you.
Cool.
All right.
All right. Let's move on to what to expect from the launch and what next week is going to look like, and what we're building and why, and then we'll do another round of questions and then we'll call it. So as I've said, because I knew this was going to happen. So, let's just revisit December and January real quickly. So in December, well, it really kind of started in November. What it ended up happening was we started designing the Examiner clear back in 2019, even maybe. I don't know. It was a long time ago. And we fell in a number of holes, and ultimately we didn't really get it off the ground until last summer. Last spring, actually. And so last spring, we really kind of got it off the ground and launched it in like May, I guess. And, at the beginning, it was mostly stakeholders that bought them, and, that was cool. We still didn't know what we had, but they were getting really good, use out of them without a lot of extra hassle. There were a couple that turned out to be hassles, but ultimately, I think for the most part, they were pretty friendly for the users, and it really gave us a lot of belief that we could really make it fly. And so we kept developing it and kept making it better. And by the time the end of summer came around, we were selling probably a handful of units per week, and they were mostly not stakeholders at that point, and they were mostly going out to pretty satisfied customers. And then we got into the October-November timeframe, and then that's when that Fonz Finds guys picked one up, and we didn't know. He didn't pick one up. He just actually picked up the idea and did a video on it. We didn't even know about it. We just, heard it. I watched the video. I said, "Wow, yeah, you got it right." Let's see if we can, if he gets his likes up on this video, we'll give him a unit at a big discount just because, hey, thanks, you did a great job for us. We didn't seek you out. We didn't pay you to do it. You did it, and we'd just like to reward you for it. And we did. And, and ultimately it was a good thing. And what happened was we got a little bit larger uptake of miners. It was good. We were on a nice, stable growth flight path, and I thought things looked really, really good. And I had no real, plan for what happened next. And, fault me for that. It is what it is. But what happened next is we got inundated because of a couple of unfortunate sorts of understandings, and then a whole bunch of people showed up thinking something. I don't know what everybody all thought, but clearly it wasn't exactly right, and it put us into a lot of really difficult sorts of situations, and ultimately we did sell a lot of units, and it did sort of set us up, but it's been a long scratch and claw process even to now. And now there are people still, haven't got their units yet, and they're screaming at us, and they're, talking about law firms and shit like that. And it's just that whole sort of thing. Well, in December, when it happened, a lot of good came out of the bad. So our systems internally just got crushed. And we ended up having to go back to the drawing board on those. We did actually, in some cases, do some upgrades to our systems, and then that got crushed. So now we're back for a third, attempt. And ultimately, we now know kind of what it's going to take in order to be able to handle this kind of exponential growth. What I've kind of told the dudes is, for 3.5 years, we've been hard at work building the back end, foundational software on this. And because everything that's ever happened to us all along the line from the beginning has been sort of bad and failure and not really helpful, we've been really good at planning for failure, but we've not been very good at planning for success. And, we have to pivot. We have to be able to plan for success because there's a pretty good chance it's going to happen. And so what ends up happening out of, December and January is we end up getting sort of, sidetracked, I guess we'll say. So January 18th was our planned sort of soft launch. We expected to have our software at least into a shape we could get out there and begin to do stuff. But that November and December just really took everybody off path. They were off doing other things. They were not working on the stuff that we needed to be working on. And so Jan 18 came and went. And I saw it the way it was happening, and I didn't stop it, but, I can't stop it. But people were out there in the Discord and in the forum saying J18, J18, big day, something weird was going to happen, like a light switch. And, I don't see how that could work, but, and of course it didn't. But, even if we had been on all cylinders, it wasn't going to happen. And it's not going to happen next week. And people saying 824, 824. And it's like people are showing up and it's like, I've had my unit on for 2 months and it's not earning anything and I'm pissed. And I just, is this a real project? And are you legitimate people? And, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, then people come in and say, yeah, but you got to wait till next week. And it's like, this guy's going to be back in 3 weeks. He's going to be even more pissed. He's going to be like, a thing of hornets. We just stuck our hand into the nest and pissed them off really badly. And this whole thing is going to take time. It's just going to take time. And remember, we're paying you $60 a terabyte or some crazy number up there, $53 a terabyte. So it doesn't matter how much you earn right now. Let me say that again. It does not matter how much you earn right now. What matters is that you're here, you've built up a solid provider, and you're able to absorb the freebies that we're giving out. And we're giving out copious amounts of freebies. So that's your goal right now. Your goal is just to stay in the groove. And then as we start to onboard the data slowly at first, we'll get 1 or 2 that will come aboard and they'll be fun and interesting. Then we'll land some other thing. And at some point, we'll get a couple of big, wins. And when those big wins come, things will begin to start to transition. I don't know when it's going to happen. Could happen soon, could happen later, could happen mid. I don't know. But what'll happen is that as people see that this thing works and they see the capabilities, they see the direction, they see everywhere we're going, they see the alignment, they will come aboard and we will ultimately begin to see that network line go up and to the right. And then at some point, it will exponentialize and turn up like a hockey stick. And that's what you're waiting for. You're not waiting for it to go from 900 terabytes to 1 petabyte, or from 1 petabyte to 2 or 3 petabytes. You're waiting for it to go from 5 petabytes to 500 petabytes, and it will get there at some point in time. And when it does, you people that were here at the beginning are going to be in just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful green fields. That's all I can say to you. I can't tell you because why the coin price will go up, or because we'll be, using all your stuff because you're the early guys, or because whatever. I'm just telling you that that's the vision. And if you buy into it, great. Thanks for being here. And we'll meet every year and shake hands and talk about how we're doing until we get to that year that you decide you can go off and live in your cabin in the woods and whatever. That's sort of the strategy. So next week, we can't fail in our view. This is something that I've been telling everybody the last week and a half. And when I say that, I think the first thing they think is, we can't fail. What does that mean? What I mean by we can't fail is we've already succeeded just by getting there, right? So, yeah, look, there are other decentralized projects out there holding storage, but how many of them are actually onboarding and booking a lot of real world storage? It's really Storage is the only project out there that can even claim that credibility. And they're not onboarding in any crazy kind of way at this point because they have a lot of issues. They have a lot of challenges in terms of how they've designed their network. In our case, we have a lot of things structurally built in to overcome a lot of their weaknesses, their structural weakness. The relayer is a gigantic piece of IP. And once people see what we're building with the relayers will show up just like the Examiners do in that console that I showed. And setting up a relayer will become very easy. In fact, I think a lot of customers will just end up buying a 1U from us that they plug in, which will be a relayer, and it'll have ransomware protection built into the cache. It'll have, specialized sections of the cache to do certain kinds of things, but the cache will be right there with the customer. Take one of the other people that are out there. I'm not going to name them. They're actually here in our Discord, but they're running a centralized service on top of SIA and Storage. And their deal is that they have an edge cache. In other words, they've utilized Cloudflare and Nginx to essentially become a, junior AWS on top of decentralized networks. I don't get the proposition there. I don't understand where the value is there. They call their edge cache something really important. And it's like, Well, yeah. I mean, you're just saying you're caching the stuff out there at a centralized provider somewhere, like Cloudflare. In our case, the cache actually happens at the customer on that relayer, and that is a gigantic pathway forward when we do move to full decentralization, because the customer always controls their data from day one with us. They never don't have control of their data. They don't have control of the contracts right now, and that's a distinction that has a lot of difference to it. Anyway, the idea is we show up at this thing with a working piece of software, and like I said, for 3.5 years we've been really working hard with senior back enders doing all of the hard Golang work on the big distributed network. And then over the last like 6 to 9 months, we've started to onboard, a couple of front enders, and those folks are starting to really go to work on that part, and that part is now part that is really starting to shape up and look pretty good. And so consequently, showing up at the trade show with a working solution is success. So even if nothing happens, but we show up at the trade show and for 4 straight days stand there and demo to maybe 6 total people, it's still a win. It's still a gigantic win. And we're spending a lot of money on it, by the way. We're spending a lot of money on it. And at the end of the day, you could make a case that we could have spent that money on coders. We could have spent it on advertising and crypto marketing. We could have spent it to get listed on Bittrex. I can think of 100 things that people can say on a short-term basis would be better ways to spend that money. But I guarantee you that the way we're spending it is the right way to spend it. Because what's going to happen out of this is people will begin to recognize that we exist in the real world. We will be able to start putting marketing and advertising in real world properties and start taking business from real world customers. Won't work perfectly out of the gate. It'll work, the way we think it'll work, and we'll keep tweaking and tuning. And then over the course of this year, as we gain more and more revenues and more and more, terabytes of data on the network, what will end up happening is I will have the capability at that point to go out and stand a dog and pony up in front of some real money people. And those real money people will be able to look at our thing and see that it has something that a lot of projects don't have. A, it's crypto, decentralization path, but then real world customer use, actual revenues spread out over multiple quarters, legal, covered, right? So we will have all of it. And at that point in time, I don't see how we don't end up coming away from that with a pretty nice capital raise. And that'll be the capital raise that will take us over the top and allow us to start onboarding engineers and marketeers and CTOs and vice presidents and all the other crap that you need to get into the game at the level that we think that we're destined to be at. So that's our strategy. We can't lose next week. And when you guys show up for the party and you show up to see us at the trade show, I think you're going to realize it, and then you're going to see the product, and you're going to also recognize that, how cool that is. And ultimately, I think everybody will recognize we're on the right path. So that's what to expect from next week. I will take some questions on it, and then we'll wrap this up. Go ahead. Oh.
Hey, thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation. Just a quick question. I just got my unit, but I didn't install it yet. Am I still kind of eligible for the rebates, or is it too late?
On an Examiner?
For me?
You're talking about having an Examiner you just got and you haven't installed it yet,
Yeah.
and you're wondering about the rebate? Your rebates are good. You're covered through your rebates. As soon as you plug it in, you're going to get rebate 1 and 2, and then over the course of the next 6 months, then you'll get, or is it the 9 month? I'm not sure. I guess it's the 9 month. Then you'll get the 3rd one, and then at the end of a year, you'll get the 4th one. So yeah, you're good to go. Everybody in this first batch one is covered, and not only that, but you're getting a bonus.
Okay, thank you so much. Because I'm having trouble with my network, so it's kind of I don't want to kind of have latency or stuff like that. So I want to be
yeah. And actually, 100%. I want to address that. Actually,
yeah,
because
sure.
it's a complaint that everybody is making right now, that they're having these issues with their network getting started up, and then they're starting up and they're having this crazy downtime look on their scanner, and it's not true. Ultimately, they will come right pretty quickly, and the amount of money that they're earning right now is not so much based on that anyway. So it is what it is. But what we're doing, I talked to Rhinus yesterday or today about it, and we think we're going to build in a small 5 or a 10-day grace period for everybody at the beginning, so that your scanning doesn't, essentially start to take hold until you actually, have a solid running instance after several days. We're not sure exactly how we're going to limit it, but we're going to build something in there for people starting up, because it just feels bad to hear people show up and say, "Oh, I ran into all these problems, and now my uptime is terrible, and I'll never succeed." And that's not a great way to start off your life on the network. So we're gonna take care of that.
Okay, sounds good. Happy to be part of the network, and happy to be part of the family. Let's say.
We're really glad you're here.
Awesome, thank you.
I had a quick question about the relayer. So, this is going to be the main point the customer is going to interface with. What about backup recovery options for it? Will it be clusterable? Because this unit has to be the unit that scans and rebalances the data across the network in case providers leave or are unavailable.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of questions in what you just asked right there, and so I'll take them a little bit and briefly touch on them, because it's really what it's 100% of what we're going to be spending a lot of our time talking about over the next couple of months, and really maybe even the rest of the year. The relayer, look, I keep saying this, and I know probably some people are getting sick of it, but if you go back to almost day one of the project, you can read the software specs I wrote up on this thing, and I named it the relayer back then, and it's finally here, and it's really gratifying to see it, because it's really cool. And the deal with the relayer is it's this distributed renter, and you are right that the database, because one of the two things we said in the beginning, two things are key to building this distributed renter. One is we need to move the metadata out of this single file thing, which is crazy, and put it into a database architecture. We did that. And then we need to change the contracts up so that they aren't, all asynchronous. So we did that. And so those things have been working fine now for over a year. But now we're starting to get these relayers instanced out there, and people are using them and banging on them. And that question of how do we protect? So there's a couple of things to protect, but the thing that you really have to protect is that cache. But now, or not the cache, but the database that holds the metadata, the contracts. And the deal there is that it's only important, though, for that one customer, and then of course the providers that they've uploaded data to, out in the real world. So yes, we do expect to recommend, and we are, having experience on our end in terms of instancing them. That certain instances will want to go all the way to clustering and to drive multiple units in order to provide that kind of protection. It's not a difficult thing, and we can certainly provide guidance on that. Others will end up just getting into a straight ahead, nightly or daily or, hourly or whatever snapshotting and saving that way. And then, of course, it's that inception thing again. We do expect at some point to have an answer on how to upload that metadata to some sort of a public relayer, network or layer that's sort of between the storage providers and the customers. We've been calling it stateless relayers, and we do have a bit of a one-pager on it, but we still have a lot of work to do there. So that is really important, and yes, we are going to be coming out of the gate with recommendations and abilities and capabilities for customers to be able to do that. The relayer is just so important to the project, and it's just such a big achievement for us, that seeing how they actually act in the wild is really going to be the most fascinating thing of the next 2 quarters.
So if whatever your your redundancy is for the data. If you lose enough providers, you're going to have to move data to new providers. So I'm assuming the relayer is going to go out and pull data from an existing provider and copy it to a new provider if you get close to that threshold.
Can't do that. Not in the way crypto works. So what's going to happen is this. So first of all, every customer is going to need to have a relayer. So, when we talk about relayers, let's say we have 100 customers, we're going to have 100 relayers. Now, any single customer might have multiple relayers, right? One customer might decide they want to have 3 relayers because they have 3, headquarters or 3 locations, or they want to do clustering or something like that. But essentially one relayer per customer at least. Okay. And so in that regards, let's say then a customer comes along and this is another really fascinating part about the relayer that affects you guys. So in the old school erasure coding, what happened is that the renter would look out there and it would be a per customer, per user, actually, not per customer. So like only one person in the enterprise could use the renter, and they would upload to a certain erasure coding ratio, and it might be like 10 of 30 or something along those lines. And so what happens is they put 30 shards out there on the network, and it takes 10. Any 10 can rebuild the data completely. So that's really huge, because that means that 2/3 of the providers could go down, and they'd still be able to retrieve their data. And that's well beyond 11 nines of durability. But if you start getting down, you lose like 8 or 9 providers in that set, you start getting a little risky. All of a sudden, your 11 nines has turned into something else, because now any 10 out of maybe 22, right, can recover your data. So at some point, you do have to go out and do what are called repairs. And active repairs are one of our priority sprints to do over the next quarter to 6 months. And active repairs is the case where you have to actually get the data again and then re-upload new segments to cover the segments that got lost. You can't go out and just grab them off anybody else's, because everybody else is operating on an individual Merkle route. So what ends up happening is there are no identical pieces of data out there. Everybody has a different piece of data due to the metadata that's holding it in place. So you have to download the entire data again, which is a bandwidth and cost intensive operation, rebuild the shards and send them up. But here's the thing. I didn't even really know this until some time back, but we had actually decided, our core engineers, who are amazing, by the way. I every day I wake up, I wonder how I found these dudes. But the situation is they came up with some tweaks and tunings to that erasure coding, so that what happens is that we take lines of data and then we send that off to whatever the number is. If it's, say, 30 providers, we send that off to 30 providers. But then it goes down through the database and takes another line. And ultimately, in the same data set, you might be sending to 30 different providers from the original 30. So in the course of a full data set that gets uploaded over the course of a week or so, or something along those lines, that customer may be uploading to 200 or 300 different providers when it's all said and done. So the durability is off the charts. I mean, it's crazy. The most they're going to end up, being at risk to lose for any given little data sliver is going to be small. And then at the end of the day, if we do start losing, some durability due to, say, a swath of providers going down due to some ISP regulation or some goofy thing that happens, then yeah, we will effectuate active repairs and we will re-upload to other providers. But that's a cost on us, by the way. That's not a cost on you. If you're available and you're there, you stand to gain if somebody else goes down. It's a dog-eat-dog world in that regard. So you will get the data if somebody else loses it. So unless, of course, you're already hosting some data from that indexed line, but otherwise you will get the data. So anyway, a lot of answers to a lot of questions there. Did it answer all the questions you were looking for?
Yeah, I just, again, the relayer honestly is the most important part of this whole deal. If you lose your relayer, you lose all access to your data, and no company is going to be happy about that. So there has to be ways to protect. There has to be ways to protect it. It has to be automatic, and I would like to know more about the active repair process, more from a customer standpoint, because that's going to be a big part of your sell. You're going to have to explain how this would work. But I won't ask you more questions.
Well, the active repairs are the back end, though. Remember, it's backing up a post. Look, the bottom line of it is backing up a Postgres database. That's not rocket science. That part is not rocket science. We can back up a Postgres database in multiple ways. We can snapshot it and do daily downloads and back that off to tape drives or to USB recovery sticks or to other media. We can build clusters for a Postgres database. Those things that's tried and true. That's easy to do. So at this point, we wouldn't be releasing this if there was a real legitimate risk there of loss. As long as you have that metadata, you can recover the data. Now, the active repairs are important, but what I think we're going to end up doing on the front end is so let me talk about another thing. And you didn't ask this question, but it's actually, I think, something you guys all want to hear, and you're definitely going to want to see it in action if you come to Las Vegas. So host selection is going to be a very, very big part of the project. If you reread the white paper, you'll see host selection is huge. And we're just getting into it now. And with host selection, what you're going to have the ability to do in the relayer is to choose a breakdown of providers. So you might say, give me all the providers that are in these 5 countries. And you click on a map and choose those 5 countries. And all those providers show up in your sort of Venn diagram. And then the next thing you say is, okay, and of those 5 countries, I want all the providers that are above 96%, availability. So now your Venn starts getting smaller and you have a smaller group. And then you break it down even further and you say, now I want the providers that, have been in service for more than 6 months or something like that. So when you're all said and done, you can build a really durable set of providers based on your own needs and even look at things like latency and closeness and proximity to your facilities. And when I say proximity, it may be you want somebody close, but you might also want somebody far away because you're trying to sort of provide more durability. And you recognize that, like maybe if you're close to the Ukraine, you don't want a bomb or something to hit your internet, backbone and all of a sudden have about 30 providers just go poof like that. So you can do that, and we will build into the early versions, more durability. We will make those provider sets bigger than they really need to be, and we'll pay for it. We will pay for it on the back end. And then as we see over time where we can cut the costs, we'll start dropping it down so that we don't end up needing to have quite as much durability in there as we initially anticipate. It's just how it works. But anyway, thought that might be interesting for you to hear as well. Okay, I guess that's it there. Let's see, we got one more question.
Hello, Examiner owner, long time listener, first time on the podium. I just have a quick question about the latest update for the Examiner. I have noticed that it updated and I see that one of the ports are gone. Just wanted to see if that's something that's intentional.
Yeah, it's intentional. So I guess I'll go ahead and get into that. I should have realized that was probably going to be part and parcel of this. I should have added it to the agenda. Yeah, we're doing an update right now, and it's across a couple of different pieces. So one of the things that happened, and I'll just cover this briefly, but I think it's useful to go through it. Back in when we decided we were going to do our version, I could go all the way back on this, but I won't. I'll just go a little ways back. So on our version of asynchronous to synchronous contracting, we came up with a thing called prepaid downloads and deferred contract updates. And if you go back and watch that Relayer sneak preview video, it talks a little bit about what it is and how it works. And what we decided to use on that from a port standpoint and protocol standpoint was HTTP. And for whatever reason, we didn't really think too clearly about the distant future and decided to go ahead and choose a new port and put it up the scale. And the previous project had done 4282, 4283, and then they had left an open protocol at 4284 for future use. So we were in this goofy place where we put in 4285, which was it was a mistake. I mean, let's just call it what it was. It was a mistake. We knew we weren't going to use 4283's protocol, so we should have just put it there in the first place. Well, we didn't, and ultimately we realized in hindsight, once we saw the support for ports, that we probably should have. And we put a lot of energy into supporting people setting up ports since then. So the deal is that the new SPD will actually default now to 4282 and 4283 for the two ports that we need only. And the good news about that is that UPnP is fully active there on those ports. So for a lot of providers that stand up an Examiner going forward, they're just going to be able to plug it in and it'll just sort of work. And that's a pretty big watershed for us if you've been watching the support channels over the last couple of months. I don't know how well it's going to work. We'll see. I mean, if it turns out to provide new areas of support, then, maybe it won't be worth it. But I think it is going to be worth it. So 2 ports, not 3, 2 in order, 2 falling right out of the gate, and it will apply to everybody, DIY and Examiners, but it will make the Examiner process easier. In addition, there are a number of UI feature updates. There are a number of supervisor, super admin updates. I won't get into them right now until you guys have had a chance to look at them, but one of the ones that's going to be really useful, I think, for us is we put a live agent functionality into the UI of the Examiner. And so shortly, you'll have the ability to communicate directly from your Examiner screen with a support agent. You won't have to join the Discord. You won't have to show pictures of you drilling holes in the back of your Examiner and doing that kind of thing. So anyway, there you go.
All right, thanks so much. I just want to put a note there that the active ones for my Examiner now are 4282 and 4285. Just a note.
Okay, well, we're going to watch that over the next couple of days, and we will have more information on whether you need to do anything or whether you can make it more efficient or how that actually works in the wild. But ultimately, you will be able to do 4282 and 4283 straight out of the box. If you already have a unit set up, it's going to just cut out 4283 because we're not using it. And 4285 is already set up as the HTTP port, so that's why you're seeing 82 and 85. In your case, you might not need to do anything. If it's working fine and your port forwards are good, then who cares? Just leave it the way it is. But it's possible you might be able to take your ports off, turn on UPnP, just have it work automatically, which the support guys are probably screaming right now saying, why did you say that? But we'll see how it plays out over the next couple of days. I'm one of the support guys, so I'm going to be right there. So anyway,
thanks so much.
Thanks. Oh my God, we made it. No more hands up, and about hour 40. It was a pretty spirited episode, pretty good one. I'm really pumped for next week, and I'm really proud of everybody involved. I just want to say, because a number of them are here in the room. I don't know if they show up and just show the flag or they actually are listening or not. And they're not all here because some of them are sleeping, of course. But everything in this project is owed to the developers and the team, that's behind it right now. I couldn't have dreamed of assembling the team that we assembled. I could never have imagined that we would have got the quality networking expertise, the quality coding expertise, the quality sort of how do you actually sew together a giant distributed system? I mean, this is literally one of the biggest engineering endeavors that could be done in the digital space. It's not, for the faint of heart. And, it's not like we're building an Android game. We're building something that is serious. And I couldn't be prouder of the people behind it that have put it together. And I think they're going to be rewarded greatly next week by a lot of positive vibes and feedback from, what they've built. And this is going to be the first real chance for the world to see what they built. And so I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a great show. I'm really pleased that the community continues to stay with us, because I think the community sees that same thing that I just mentioned, that the team behind the project is top notch and aces. And the people that truly believe and truly support, God bless you and thank you for being here, because you're going to be part of something really special and important going forward. So without further ado, we'll see you next time, whenever it is. We will be doing some live streaming from the show, and I will mention that as we get closer. But for now, good night.